Hey everybody, today we're going to focus on scientific notation, and remember we can use a calculator when we are doing these types of problems. A few things I wanted to remind you all would be, remember, if you want to raise an exponent to a certain power, you use the caret key. If you want to write a number in scientific notation, you can just write the number, and here's this key that makes already times 10, and then you just put whatever your exponent would be in. Also, remember when you hit the mode key, you'll get to a screen that looks like this. Normal mode is what we are usually in, but remember, if you want to express a number in scientific notation and let the calculator do the work, make sure you have the SCI button highlighted. So those were just a few things I wanted to refresh your memory on. And if you start to look at your packet, a few things, remember, what you see up here in this top part are our cubes. So remember, the cubed root of 1, you think 1, what number multiplied by itself 3 times would give you 1? In this case, it's 1. The cubed root of 8, 2 times 2 times 2 would give you 8. The cubed root of 27 is 3, because 3 times 3 is 9, times 3 is 27. The cubed root of 64 would be 4, because 4 times 4 times 4 is 64. Cubed root of 125 is 5. Cubed root of 216 is 6. And lastly, the cubed root of 343 is 7. The PSSAs require you to know the first 7 cubed roots or cubed values. Also, please stress to know the difference between the square root key and the cubed root key. And going back to this calculator screen, remember the square root key, all you have to hit is the second key and the x squared key. That gives you the square root key. However, if you want to express a number with a cubed root, you can press first you press the number 3 for cubed root, then second, and then the caret key. So like I said, hold on, I have to get Maverick in. Hold on one moment, please. To express the difference between a square root and cube root, make sure you know the buttons on your calculator, and if you are unsure or unaware, please ask your teacher or another student at this time. So some of this packet requires you to do the problems. Some of it tells you to only do the circled problems or all. I'm going to do some of the problems with you, and you'll see at the top of your paper what is required for homework. So this first page makes you do all of them. Like I said, I already started you off, and I'm going to continue to do a few more problems on this page. So for example, if we look at question number 2, 0.56 written in scientific notation, all you have to do literally in your calculator is make sure you're in scientific notation. So like I was trying to tell you before I got rudely interrupted by Maverick, this number 2 right here, if you plug 0.56 in your calculator and make sure you're in scientific notation mode, it will give you the answer for you. Or if you forget that, remember, scientific notation is always a value that's between 1 and 10, and it's always times 10 to a certain power. Remember, this power is how many times you technically are moving your decimal. So if I move my decimal 1 time, because 5.6 is in between 1 and 10, and then I multiply times 10, since I moved my decimal point once, it's to the first power. However, this number was less than 1 to begin with, and that's why you have a negative exponent. Number 4, same thing. To get a value, this is 84,000. Remember, the number out in front needs to be greater than 1 but less than 10. So I can literally move my decimal 1, 2, 3, 4 times. So I would have 8.4, which is in between 1 and 10, times 10 to the 4th power. Remember, values less than 1 have negative exponents. Values greater than 1 have positive exponents. And when you are doing this, like I said, if you forget these rules, you can always plug it in your calculator. So for these problems down here, you can make sure that you are in the normal mode or norm mode. And if you type in the value exactly as you see it, it will give you the answer in the calculator. Or if you want to try it without the calculator, remember whatever your exponent is how many times you move the decimal. So since I have a -2, I move my decimal to the left 2 times. There's 1 space available to fill with a value, so I'm going to plug in my 0. So this answer would be 0.024. Let's also look at number 7. I'm raising it to the 4th power. Positive means I'm moving my decimal to the right 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. I have 2 spaces to fill without values, so that's where you plug in your zeros. So this answer would end up being 11200. Make sure you put in your commas where necessary, so you would have 11,200. So on this page here, I'm requiring you to fill in the evens. So I'm going to do a few odd questions just so you refresh your memory and remember. So for question 1, you literally type this exactly in your calculator as you see fit. Number 3, same thing. Type it in your calculator exactly as you see fit. So for number 3, let's just say, once I type this in my calculator, make sure you use the parentheses. Your answer would be 9.28 times 10 to the -11th power. I know these exponents are kind of hard to see, so if you were on your paper that you actually will see in Schoology, the exponents and values should be much clearer. I always like to use the parentheses around my separate scientific notation numbers just because it's helpful for me. Remember, when you get into division, like you see here for 7 through 12, you must make sure your numerator is in a parenthesis and your denominator is in a parenthesis. If it's not, you may not get the right answer. So like I said, you always want to use parentheses for division, especially if you don't see it. Make sure you use it when you're plugging it in your calculator. So if I did number 7 correctly with parentheses, my final answer would be 8.6 times 10 to the 4th power. Number 13, you are just raising a power to a power, but remember, you don't have to memorize those rules. Type that exactly in your calculator, and your answer would be 6.27 times 10 to the 23rd power. This page for your homework, I want you to do all of this. Remember, when I ask you to convert to standard form, that means make sure you're in the normal mode. When it asks you to find out which values are larger or smaller, you always want to compare your exponents. So you might want to write that at the top. When it asks you to decide if values are larger or smaller, you always compare your exponents. Remember, larger values have larger exponents, and vice versa, smaller values have smaller exponents. So if you took a look at number 2, it asks for the larger value. If I look here, always check your exponents. My exponent is a 2, my exponent is a 4. 4 is larger than 2, so that's why 7 times 10 to the 4th is larger. Like I said, when you're looking for larger or smaller values, just look at your exponents. This page, you are also doing all of it. One thing I wanted to note, especially for this question, x squared equals 144. Remember, anytime I give you a value, for example, if I give you x squared is equal to 100 and I want you to find out what x is, I know many of you will just say 10. However, it can be positive 10 or negative 10. Make sure you remember that, because 10 times 10 is 100, and also negative 10 times negative 10 is also 100. So make sure it is imperative that you put that symbol there with it. On this question here, remember, anytime on a word problem when it deals with scientific notation and it asks how many times as thick or how many times as great, that how many times is a buzzword. When you see that, remember you must divide. So always take whatever it's asking first. How many times as thick is the skin on the human back, which is your first value here, as on the human eyelid. So this is your second value. So take your first number, which would be 3 times 10 to the negative third. Remember, since I'm dividing, I'm putting my numerator in parentheses and then my denominator in parentheses. And when I do that and divide in my calculator, that will give you the answer. So make sure you are trying to use that for help as well. In addition, if you needed help with the first one, what is the total number of small plastic cubes in each truck? For this one, give it a shot. Think about if you have 5 to the third small plastic cubes and they're shipped in boxes that contain 5 to the second puzzles, so I'm going to multiply those together, and they're loaded into trucks that contain 5 to the third boxes. What I need you to do is follow the rules for multiplication with the same base. This problem here, remember the buzzword in the question. How many times as great? Think about what operation that's telling you to do. When we get down here with this question, yes, there's a ton of wording. And yes, you have to estimate it on the number line. But literally, they give you the equation. X to the third is equal to 70. They want to know if the volume is 70, what would the side length be? You're basically trying to figure out what X is. So we have to get X by itself. The opposite of cubing is to take the cubed root of each side. When I do that, on my left, all I'm left with is X. So X is equal to the cubed root of 70. And make sure you plug that in your calculator correctly. If you forget how to do that, ask your neighbor or your teacher, or refer to the beginning of the video, and we would have roughly X equals 4.1. The only one up here that has X less than 5, if you look here, would be A. So I want you, remember, to make sure to do this entire page. A few other just helpful hints. Remember, in your calculator, and they might express it this way on your PSSAs, if I give you something like 5.7 E6, and that's displayed in your calculator, remember that just means 5.7 times 10 to the 6th power. Sometimes you might just see it with one E. It might just say, for example, here's another one, 6.3 E negative 8. And that would mean 6.3 times 10 to the negative 8. I hope this information has helped you. Like I said, your job is to finish that entire packet, either the circled problems or if it says to do even or odd, or the entire page. Make sure you ask your teacher for help if you need it, and we will go from there. Have a wonderful day.